Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be talking about prolific British horror author James Herbert. And I'm also going to have a look at my collection and just give some fascinating, interesting things about the author. Stay tuned. Before we begin, I have spoken a lot of times on this channel about Stephen King, Clive Barker, Dean Koontz, even Graham Masterton, but I've never mentioned James Herbert. And he was such a prolific, popular writer in Britain, and he churned out 23 books, but he's very rarely spoken about in the same breath as Stephen King. In fact, very often he just takes the kind of little thing by the wayside. And I want to, for this particular video, I want to encourage you to maybe pick up a James Herbert book or two if you haven't already. Okay, just some interesting information about the man, the author. He was born in 1943 and he sadly passed away in 2013, leaving a wife and 3 daughters. Very interesting, he grew up in a place in London called Petticoat Lane, Whitechapel. And for those of you in the know, that is where the infamous Jack the Ripper used to roam for his victims. So that's where he grew up. Second fact is all the kids at his school during recess, or is it during playtime, they used to crowd around him for story time. So he used to tell tales every break to all the kids in his school. Third interesting thing about him is he was very good buddies with Stephen King, and apparently one night they got drunk. This is a story that he spoke about, that one night they got really drunk and they saw a ghost, which is very interesting. Okay everyone, I just asked permission from my wife because she had a similar experience with her sister. One night they stayed up too late and they had too much to drink maybe, and my mother-in-law played a practical joke on them and kind of appeared around the corner in the shadows, and they were both convinced they saw a ghost. So yeah, I thought I would just relay that to you without embarrassing my wife too much. But hey, these things happen. You have a little bit too much, weird things happen. So yeah. And the fourth thing is he was awarded an OBE, which is an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, and he was awarded this by Prince Charles himself. And now, just to give you an idea of the honour, this is just one step below a knighthood. So yeah, there was indeed an honour because of his contribution to British literature. So those are some interesting facts about this particular author. Okay, so we're on to my collection, which I'm ordering by publication date. Now, he's written 23 novels, so he's published 23 novels, of which at the moment I have 12, and a couple of duplicates, in fact 3 duplicates, and I'm very irritated because I actually lost 2. One of them being my favourite by him, called Once, as in Once Upon a Time. I really enjoy it when he does fantasy as well as horror. I like horror writers writing fantasy or fantastical settings. For some reason that really gets to me. And the other one being probably one of his crappiest books, which I didn't enjoy so much, but I love the cover, and that is Sepulture. So I'm very upset that I can't show these to you today. They are also lost in transit. When we moved from the big city down here, we had all sorts of things that went missing, or rather stolen. So we lost a lot of books, goodness knows why, and all sorts of stuff. Okay, and everyone, if you hear some children's laughter, it's because they're out to play a game. They got like a little playground in our neighbour's area. We love them very much. We kind of exchange Christmas gifts and cookies. But they've got 3 children, young children. They've got a swing, I think the dad made, and a little trampoline and all sorts of stuff like that. So if you hear shouts of joy, then that's what it is. Okay, so here goes my books. First book, and the first book he wrote in 1974, same time that Jaws was released, and that is The Rats by James Herbert. And now this is a very gory, very graphic novel, full of tension and suspense. Funny that it came out in the same year that the Jaws was released by Peter Benchley. And yeah, this is about overgrown, kind of mutated rats that start feeding in London. And just be warned, they don't just feed on people, adults, they also feed on animals. And I remember there's a baby involved. So just be warned, trigger warning. If you have a real problem with animal violence, in other words harm to animals, don't read The Rats. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. I found it, but it's ages since I've read it, and I know it's the first part in a series, so I will be looking for part 2 and part 3, so maybe I can actually read all 3 again, give them a reread. So yeah, that's The Rats. And it's also definitely the one book that he's best known for. And actually on my little reads through the internet, I also found out that it's got a lot of social commentary, if I remember correctly, a lot about society post-World War II, and the corruption sort of in the, I think in the government or just in society in general. And I think that's also because a lot of homeless people get eaten up as well by the rats. So yeah, that's The Rats. And I'm missing The Fog by James Herbert. I think I had a copy at one stage, but I've never read it. I've heard that it's also a very, very highly acclaimed novel of his, and I'd love to read it one day, so I'm going to be on the lookout for that. Second book that I'm going to present is The Survivor. Now, I have read this, as far as I know. I'm trying to remember. No, maybe not. I think I mentioned it on one of my book hauls, but it's about a plane crash, and from the plane crash there's one survivor. The plane crashes on this like small town, and then very weird and sinister things start happening in this town, and the question is, how are they linked to the plane crash and the survivor and what's actually happening here. And it does sound very, very interesting. The cover is kind of bland, but yeah, I'll definitely pick this up at some stage. Okay, the next book I read very recently, and actually this was my only 5-star from James Herbert. I really need to reread his other novels that I enjoyed, to see if maybe as an adult, not as a teen, might find them a little bit different. But this was James Herbert, Fluke. And I've got 2 copies of this one and this one. And this book took me by surprise in 2023. Just a wonderful story about a dog who thinks he's a man, in his conscious thoughts. It's all told from the perspective of his dog, and in his conscious thoughts he has memories of being a man, and of something eventually, as the story unfolds, something happening in his family, and it just starts. It is very exciting, it's thrilling. It's more a thriller than a horror, but there are some dark places, and it's also heartbreaking at times and very moving. But yeah, I strongly recommend this, Fluke. I'll show you this cover again. And most of these are nice, short, easy reads until I get to my next one, or actually no, some of them quite long, but most of James Herbert's books are around the 200-page mark, 250-page mark, so it's not a huge time investment to get into them and try some real good vintage horror. Okay, so that's Fluke. Okay everyone, so next up we got the 4th book, and in fact I've also got 2 of these copies. I've actually got 3, but I'm only showing you 2 because 2 of the same cover. That's what happens, you go shopping, you forgot that you got a particular cover or a particular book. It can suck sometimes, but I'm okay with it. But this is James Herbert, The Spear. Now I love this cover, those very hectic eyes and the spear coming up. And I love this cover as well, but a little bit less. I think they're both from the 1970s, 1980s. So yeah, I like the vintage horror covers. And I remember really enjoying this book. And all I really remember about it is Nazis or neo-Nazis. and the spear, which is basically the spear that was put into Christ's side. The spear of Christ, I can't remember what you call it. But let me just quickly recap here. Hang on, I think this is the better one. When Stedman agreed to investigate the disappearance of a young Mossad agent, oh yes, there was a whole Jewish thing involved as well, after World War II, he had no idea he would be drawn into a malevolent conspiracy of neo-Nazi cultists, yes, bent on unleashing an age-old unholy war. On an unsuspecting world, power rising out of a demonic relic from man's dark primal past to threaten humanity with horror from beyond any nightmare. Now, I really enjoyed this book, and just to be clear, that some of these books read more as a thriller, so it's sort of like a suspense thriller with horror parts in it, and it's kind of what I remember about this book. It's almost like a spy thriller adventure thing, but very dark at the same time. Yeah, so that is James Herbert, The Spear. Okay, next up we have The Dark by James Herbert. I love this cover. Something about it that is just so creepy and unsettling. However, I do remember this book just being kind of okay. I don't know what it was about it. Might have been the characters or the Go Away Fly. Might have been the characters, might have been the setting, it might have been, I don't know, the ending, or might have dragged. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, the parts that are creepy and truly terrifying. And it's suitable that the kids are screaming in the background. Once again, nothing I can do about that. It came like a malignant shadow with seductive promises of power. And somewhere in the night, a small child, a small girl, smiles as her mother is burned. Asylum inmates slaughtered their attendants. In slimy tunnels once human creatures gathered. Madness raged as the lights began to fade and humanity was attacked by an ancient, unstoppable evil. So basically this black settles down and everyone kind of goes mad with killing, like a killing rage. And I remember I enjoyed it. It was fun. But I don't know, maybe just a miss on my part for this particular one. Maybe the ending, maybe the characters, just maybe repetitive, I can't remember. But yeah, you can check it out if you want. The Dark. Okay, next up, The Shrine, 1983. By the way, The Dark was 1980, so we're moving into the 80s now. And I must be honest with you, I read the back of this book and it doesn't really appeal to me that much out of all these books. That's The Shrine. Now, also it is one of these longer ones. I think it's 400 and something pages, and I saw on Goodreads that people had a problem with it dragging. So perhaps it's better. Oh, bloody fly. Perhaps it's better if I gave this one a skip. But let me just quickly tell you the back. A little girl called Alice, a deaf mute, a vision, a lady in shimmering white, who says she is an immaculate conception. And Alice can suddenly hear and speak, and she can perform miracles. Okay, so what happens is that she can start performing miracles at this particular shrine, and people go to the shrine and there's something evil there that's lurking there. I don't know, it sounds a bit too complicated for me, not really my kind of thing, so I'm going to give this one a skip, unless you tell me otherwise. Next up we have a book that I really did enjoy, and that is The Magic Cottage. Now, this is like a loving young couple in a magical cottage in a lovely wood. Once again, that whole fantastical setting, beautiful, just like children screaming and crying while they're playing. It's just a wonderful setting and just a wonderful tone. I remember this book being kind of a slow burn, kind of long setup, but the second half of the book is absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this magical, because there's good magic and there's also bad magic. Yeah, and the bad magic and evil cultists also come into play in this particular novel. So I would recommend The Magic Cottage. Maybe it needs a reread from me. Next up we got Haunted in 1988. And yeah, I know this is a popular one, but this book kind of says to me why I don't like haunted house stories, that trope. I'm not crazy about that anymore. About this investigator who goes to this mansion to find out what the hell's going on, and there's these kids in this family. And it had its moments, it's creepy, it's chilling, but I just don't get overly scared by these haunted house stories anymore. And I want to be terrified. And this is the first part in a 3-part series. And it makes it very interesting because I'm going to get to the second part in a moment, which I actually really loved. And I read them out of sequence. I read this last year. I didn't even know it was part of a series. But the second thing is so different to The Haunted. And this really just didn't appeal to me. I think I gave it 3 stars. Okay, now we've got The Ghosts of Sleeth. And that was released in 1994. This is one of my favorites. This was exceptional. A wonderful horror. And it's not in a haunted house. This is part 2 with the same character, the investigator. But he goes to a village that's besieged by evil. And I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this. I highly recommend it. And yeah, it's very highly recommended on Goodreads as well. And for what I hear, it's one of his favorites. So pick it up. So now you're talking about a village being terrorized and not just a haunted house. So this was phenomenal. The Ghosts of Sleeth. Oh, and by the way, I've got another copy of The Ghosts of Sleeth. A beautiful hardcover. James Herbert, The Ghosts of Sleeth. Look at that gold lettering. I'm going to put it up there as well. But just even at the back and on the spine, it's absolutely gorgeous, and I love this cover. So yeah, this is actually, I wouldn't say it's my prized possession, but it'd probably be in my top 10, 20 covers that I own. It's absolutely gorgeous. The detail is wonderful. Okay, we're on the final 3. This one is 48, released in 1996. And it sounds like I have not read it, but I want to. It sounds like a really fun post-apocalyptic, like thriller, horror kind of novel, set in a dystopian, alternative universe London. And now basically Hitler gets his revenge and releases a thing called the Blood Death on London. And 3 years later you got these survivors, and it sounds like a really action-packed, fun thriller horror. And it's been highly rated as well. I've heard people rave about this book. So yeah, this is going to be on my TBR, 48. Okay, next up we have Others. Now, this was just a kind of okay book for me. I enjoyed it. It's creepy in place, it's chilling. And it's a private investigator who has to go off in search of this missing child. But apparently the child's already dead, died in childbirth. It's quite a creepy premise and the stuff that goes on, but I don't know, there's just something about it that didn't get to me. But yeah, it's also highly ranked, so maybe check it out yourselves, and that is The Others. Okay, finally we got another book that I would love to read. It comes highly recommended, and that is Nobody True by, once again, James Herbert. Now I don't know anything about this particular book, but I have heard it is brilliant. It is kind of long as well. I think it's about 400 pages, over 400 pages. But let's very quickly just look at the back. And this is a very interesting concept. I love this premise. That's why I'm actually looking forward to reading this book. I wasn't there when I died. I'd returned from one of those out-of-body dreams. The kind where you feel your spirit has left your body and it isn't really a dream. But somebody murdered me while I was away, mutilated me, left nothing for me to come back to. Who did it? A serial killer terrorizing the city, or someone closer, someone known to me? But I had no enemies, at least I didn't think I had. And it's scary when you meet the serial killer, when horror is followed by an even greater horror, when your own family is threatened and only you can stop the killings. So what can you do? You have no substance, no real power, you cannot even touch. What the hell do you do? Now some of you might immediately be recalling, it was an 80s movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore called Ghost, which I loved. This does sound a lot more terrifying. A similar kind of premise, but yeah, I actually want to get to this at some stage. That sounds quite chilling. Okay everyone, so that's my James Herbert video. Let me know if you read any of those books that I mentioned below, and tell me if I should prioritize, because I do plan to read a few more in the months to come for my Read What Your Own challenge. Tell me if there's any books I should prioritize over others. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.